All right, we are live.
Hey everybody, and welcome back. We have a nice surprise for you, hopefully a nice surprise for you tonight. We've upgraded the camera that is on the painting, so you should get a much better view of what's going on. We realized after we filmed last week, Daniel actually doesn't have a clean view of the painting while I'm working. I'm kind of blocking him, so he's not able to see what's actually going on here. And after we finished, and he came up to take a quick photograph, he realized there's a lot of information here he couldn't see, which means you couldn't see it. And so we've upgraded one of our cameras, and so hopefully you have a much better view of what is going on here. We're gonna really ramp this up tonight. I'm gonna knock out this arm, and then I'm gonna pull all of the armor up. I'm gonna make it really nice, and then hopefully get to the mountains and even the shadows and the rocks down below. I hate now to start saying stuff like that because we know where that goes. But anyway, so we're just gonna jump in. I'm gonna get the arm going first, manage the arm, and then I'm gonna tighten up all of the armor down below. Try to bring it to completion tonight and really, make it nice and three-dimensional against the background, make it pop a little bit. And that's just gonna be, we're gonna be elevating our values. You've been working in here, we're gonna start moving up into these values to detail some of what's going on in here. So, again, this is the same paint. I've not mixed more paint. This is the same exact paint I've been using all along. I mixed enough paint and I keep closing it when I've broken it open, and I scoop paint out. I then seal it back by pushing the skinned layer back over the paint, hopefully keeping everything that's inside wet. I don't need a lot of paint at this point. It's really just this, and this stuff is going to be really minor, and it's mostly these shades which I haven't really touched yet. So, but again, I mixed enough paint. This has lasted me 3. I could probably push it out 1 more week before I would exhaust these shades that I've really been tapping along the way. So I'm going to use a knife, and I'm just going to peel the skin back. Now you can see this is nice and wet in here. Grab that paint, pull it out, and then I'm going to close this back up. Everything inside should stay nice and dry now. I didn't leave it opened at all. So I just make sure it's tapped down. I have more than enough paint out here now. If I need more, I can always go back in later on. But I should have more than enough here. I think I'm gonna wind up putting a little bit of medium in it tonight, which I haven't done up until now. I just gotta see it, because it is gonna be a little bit stiffer as it's been sitting. So I'm gonna put just a drop of medium in it. Just loosen it up just a tiny little bit. I mean, I barely put anything in here. But it's going to help it to flow off the brush just a little bit. And just going to jump right in and start filling in my darker shades. Now, there's not a lot in here that's very dark. I got some darks down in here, but really not that many darks out here. So I'm going to be quickly moving out of this into these lighter shades. And I'm going to try to keep track of this relative to this, how bright these things are relative to this, so that I can keep them in relation to one another. I'm basically jumping into this exactly the way that I've done everything else. I'm going to get all of my darkest shades laid in first, and then I'll start building up, I'll start moving in the direction of my lights. So depending on how the evening goes, I have a treat for everybody later on. My daughter and the model for this painting is actually sitting over there painting. She's starting a new painting. And I showed you the dog portrait she was working on a couple of weeks back. But if I have time, I'm going to bring her over. You'll be able to talk to her for a couple of minutes, and we'll show you some of her recent work. Just a few pieces so you can get a sense of what she's doing at 14, 15, 16 years old using this technique. Or using the education, not this particular technique, but the education that we offer through Evolve. I'm going to make sure that I'm getting this whole edge so that I can blend my lights into this. There's a very soft edge between the arm and the body, so I don't want to have an abrupt jump. I want to make sure that there is some of this darker paint down here, just to make sure that any transitions are nice and soft. Again, as I'm working, I'm constantly back and forth between my reference and my painting. I spend more time looking at the reference than I do looking at the painting, because the reference is where all the information is. Trying to make sense of all of the shapes that are here. A lot of my drawing is gone, so I'm having to look at the photograph and figure out what my intent was, what marks mean what things and what's missing, and fill in the gaps in my head as I go. So I'm going to mark here. As I'm going, any questions you guys have, I'm happy to answer them. We should be able to move along at a pretty good pace today.
Yeah, that's great. So you'll be painting the arm and then into the rocks and mountains?
Yeah, I'll do the mountains second. The mountains are the same colors and values as this, or the same basic range. And then the shadows and the rocks, I'm not going to paint the rocks, just the shadows. I'll just scribble them in so that those darks are placed. What's down already here will actually hold the place of the lights really well. And then all I have to do is kind of decorate the rocks when I come back around to them in the next sitting. Right, and that's one of the nice things about toning the canvas or toning the board. This is a good approximation of this. All I need to do is get a little bit more color in there and some highlights. And so there's not a lot to do once I drop those shadows in. Right now it doesn't look like much because there's no contrast between the shadows and the lights. But once those shadows go in, this is going to feel like rock. And then it's just a matter of a little bit of texture on the lit side. It's funny, we have brushes, the Evolve brushes that are made for us. They're from Old Holland. And it's funny, I get asked all the time why I don't use them. I'm always using these cheaper brushes. And it's funny, like I've gotten accustomed to the cheap brushes, the way they feel. The brushes that we have made are like really, really high quality. They're like steak, and I'm like a hamburger kind of guy. So I'm trying to get back into the habit of using them because they really are, you know, we really pull out all the stops with this stuff. And these brushes are so nice. I'm just not accustomed to it, you know, and it's like, but I do get asked. I get asked all the time why I don't use them. Even Steve, the guy who put Old Holland and Evolve together, he asks me all the time why I don't use them. And I'm actually, Steve, if you're watching, I'm working with them. But yeah, they're a really nice, high quality brush. They're handmade. They're not made by machine. They're actually made by hand. And but like I said, I'm so accustomed to these cheaper brushes, these throwaways. And those of you who have been around for a while know, like sometimes at the end of the night, if it goes late, I don't wash my brushes. I just throw them away. I would not throw these away. They're too nice. They're too expensive. I wouldn't throw them away. I don't feel bad throwing away the simple Simmons brushes. Some nights I ask Daniel to wash my brushes, and some days he just looks at me like I have two heads. So I don't always get a yes from him when I ask.
I don't know that that's true. Come to think of it.
Oh, there must have been a time. Well, maybe it's just that I don't want to impose. So Daniel's great. He never says no. Whatever I want, that's it. It just gets done.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a time I said no. I can't really think of something.
Oh, the pushback ended when I stopped teaching?
Yeah.
It's only part of the education that you push back. Once that ended, you became compliant.
Over time, I began to realize how much of a difference the education you gave me made. So maybe I became more grateful, indebted, perhaps. As we were just saying a moment ago before we started this live stream, if you have patience for me, I'll come around. But I'm a little slow in the uptake.
Comments on what people were able to see tonight?
Yeah, people are much happier to see the details.
Yeah, good.
Though Jasmine here is advocating for me. She said, #justice for Daniel, LOL.
Yeah. Daniel is well taken care of here. Well taken
No,
care of.
let's start a movement, start an uprising. I wouldn't
take
do
my
that.
job.
Oh gosh. Yeah, people have been asking me to do these kinds of live streams, and I think it could be somewhere in my future, but not right now. I mean, the ability to like do what Kevin is doing right now, I don't know if people really realize this, but just painting at this level of detail, keeping in mind both the intricate process of, say, like painting this arm in front of him, but then also the whole painting in mind, and being able to answer questions like cleaning brushes and different mediums is pretty insane. I tried recording myself once, pretending it was a live stream, and I couldn't even finish my sentences. So,
It's much easier when you've had a couple of drinks before you start.
Is that right?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Sounds about right, though.
Coffee helps, though.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The caffeine. Any questions?
Yes, we do have a couple questions. Well, actually, I'll start with Harry. So Harry's saying to sign those brushes and have a raffle. The ones that we were throwing away. And Becky suggested, why not use a brush cleaner on those nights?
Well, the brush cleaner thing, even that takes a few moments. And some nights when I'm done, I am done. I'm done. I don't want to look at anything. I want to just get away. And so, and again, it's not okay. It's not okay to be wasteful like that. But the cheaper brushes, they allow for it. I don't feel so bad about it. Like I said, I wouldn't dare. I wouldn't dare do it to the Evolve brushes. It's actually quite nice now that I'm working with it. Like I said, I'm accustomed to a very different feel. It's easy to stay in your comfort zone. You know, for me, it's pretty much what I do. Like, I'm staying in my comfort zone with my brushes rather than taking advantage of this really nice thing that we have access to.
So I do have a question here
Yes.
from David Engler. When would it be appropriate to start with midtones instead of darks? That's a great question, I think.
Well, so like my take on it is that you have to understand what you're doing. You have to be able to see the finished painting before the first marks go down to do that. And that takes some time. It takes some time. I mean, like, this technique, like you're seeing it, it's not that complicated, but it's not that complicated because I'm explaining it as I go, and I'm breaking it down. And if you're in the program and you've kind of moved along a little bit, you've already had a lot of the information that would fill in the gaps given to you. And so somebody who's never touched paint before, middle ground painting it doesn't anchor you to anything when you first start, right? And it's like you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in order to do middle ground painting as a starting point. Because everything, right, you talk about like paintings go through an ugly phase. Well, it's ugly at the beginning and it doesn't look like anything but a mess. And it takes a long time to start tightening everything up. Like, I mean, you think about, like, none of this was touched for the longest time, and it's just an eyesore as I'm working on these areas in the background, pushing back shadows and pulling forward lights. You have to be okay with that. Like, these things are disconnected. But if this was a scene where it was all connected, where it was all in one space, it would look terribly disjointed for quite some time. Right, and so if you start establishing, if you work from shadow to light, generally speaking, the board will hold the place of the lights because it is lighter than the shadows. And so it makes more sense visually while you're learning. But look, you can experiment with it on your own time. Like, if you're in Evolve, don't deviate in the homework assignments, but you can experiment with it a little bit. You see what I'm doing here. Be careful about changing or losing track of where you are in the program if you do that, though. And that's a real fear, right? It's nice. You look down the road and you're like, ooh, I'm seeing this thing that's going to be 3 months out from now. Getting a little bit overzealous and starting to play with that stuff because you're seeing it here and losing track of the training you're getting, which makes this possible at the level that I'm doing it. Right? You need all of those steps. If you jump over 5 steps at some point, right? If you're going up steps, learning, each step is a bit of an education, and you jump over 5 steps, yeah, maybe you can do the jump because you know what the 5th step looks like by watching a video like this. But eventually you go another 8 or 10 steps, you realize the 4 steps you jumped over, you need that information. You need that information, experience, you need all of the things that those 4 steps would have offered, and they're now missing. Going back and getting them is not that easy. It's because the gaps, you've now had to change your thinking to fill the gaps along the way that were missing. You now got to erase that thinking to put this information that you missed in place. It's not that simple. And that's why, like in Evolve, everything is structured in a very particular way. I mean, again, you can experiment with this. I wouldn't do more than one very simple painting, like maybe take an 8x10 canvas and do a simple still life, an apple, a can, something like that. Don't go too crazy, right? Because you do a portrait, unless you are good at painting portraits, which, that's a serious skill. All you're gonna do is make a mess and frustrate yourself, and there's gonna be nothing positive to come of it. But if you do something simple, even one of the Evolve homework assignments, on your own, that's not one you would submit, it would be one you would do on your own, just to experiment with this. Do one of the earlier color pieces, just to see how it plays out, just so you get it in your head, but don't do a lot of them. Do one just so you can see it, and then get back to work where you belong in the program. Nothing in the program is just thrown out there. Everything is structured and organized so that it builds on top of the thing that came before it, and each thing is in place before, you get to part number 3, 1 and 2 are necessary to understand and apply it. Part 4 requires 1, 2, and 3. Part 5, 1 through 4. And so you want to be careful about bouncing around. You want to keep everything ordered as you go. Once the foundations are built, then you can experiment. But you want to make sure that you're not experimenting until those foundations are all within your control. It's too easy to lose track of what you're doing by taking in something new. And I say, like, if you're studying in a program, don't do 2 programs at once. Because the language is different, the directions it pulls you are different. You will learn from neither of the programs if you do 2 programs at once. It'll be a convoluted mess in your head. 1 program at a time, right? We've had people who have been interested in Evolve, and they are doing a different program at the time. And I've discouraged them from jumping into Evolve while they were still doing the other program. You gotta put that one down when you're done with it, then come over and do this and this alone. And that was my recommendation, because it's just too easy for these things to become confused. And the foundations in one place are not the same as the foundations in another. And all of the steps along the way, it leads to a mental mess. So.
I forget if you mentioned this, Kevin, but back to that question about starting with midtones instead of darks. We do teach both ways through different techniques.
Yes,
so,
later on.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, what I'm doing here is a variation on what we do in block 6. Anyone who's done block 6 in the program will recognize what I'm doing, recognize the ideas. The application's a little bit different, but anyone who's done block 6 should easily be able to take this and run with it. Because the application's different, but the thinking is identical. Lots of little wrinkles down in here. I just got to figure them out. Lots of value shifts down in here. My darkest shades down in here are not this dark. So I've got to be careful not to put this down in places where it doesn't go. And so a little bit of extra calculation in here for this sleeve.
Got a question from Rebecca Rogers. Is it easier to paint the fine details on gesso board as opposed to canvas?
So there's a trade-off, right? So because this is so smooth, the brush glides across it instead of bumping. But again, like, depends what material you're working on. Like high-end linen is really smooth. Not quite as smooth as the panel, but it's really smooth, and the brush isn't going to bump over it. Cotton canvas tends to have a deeper weave, and so the brush kind of bounces over those little mountains and valleys. The details are a little bit easier here, but you can have this level of detail on even the roughest canvas if you know what you're doing. You adjust what you're doing for the material. Just like on the board, gradients are really, really tough. Making a gradient here, you have to be so delicate and really kind of polish the surface, where canvas naturally creates gradients just by kind of scrubbing the brush. Here, they have to be built with a great degree of care because any pressure on here just lifts the paint right off the board. It's like painting on glass. So there's nothing here where the paint bites. It just sits on the surface. It doesn't actually sit on the surface, but relative to canvas, it doesn't bond the same way, or at least it doesn't feel like that when it comes off the brush. This is like ice skating. And so when you put the paint down, you've got to be a bit more delicate with it. There's a trade-off. Again, I can paint at this level, or this kind of softness, these gradients, these details. Doesn't matter what the surface is, and all it is that I will adjust for the material. So it's not that one allows one thing and one allows another, but like for the panel, the sharp lines are going to be a little bit easier, especially if they have to be long and straight, but the gradients become more work. And on the canvas, the straight lines, those crisp details can be a little bit harder to put in, but the gradients are easy. And so there's a trade-off, and that's going to be the case with any material you work with. Same with the switch, like going from one brush to another, a sable to a synthetic to a bristle. You can do the same detail with a bristle brush as you do with a sable, but you have to manage the tool a little differently in order to get the result. But all three brushes will give you the result that you're looking for. You just have to manage them differently when you work.
And another question from David. My boards sometimes warp. Is that because I am not putting down enough gesso or using too much water with my acrylics?
If we're talking about an illustration board, can you clarify that? I don't want to answer it until I know what kind of board we're talking about.
Sure.
I mean, 'cause I can understand if it's an illustration board, I can address that.
Sure. We'll see what David says.
And some of this as I'm working, I'm starting to draw a little bit, getting some lines in, which will help me to figure out where things go. Some of it is not as obvious as it seems it should be.
Okay, Kevin.
Yeah.
They're labeled canvas panels, so he's not using illustration board.
So give me the original question. The original thing.
Yeah. My canvas panels sometimes warp. Is that because I am not putting down enough gesso or using too much water with my acrylics?
Okay, so if you are gessoing yourself, you may need to gesso both sides, right? So when you wet it on one side, it drinks in the water, it expands, and, right? So if you, like an illustration board, which is made of like cotton, it's rag, when you gesso it, you gesso both sides. Or you wet one side and you gesso the other. That way, it's taking in water, liquid from all directions, and that will help to keep it flat. You may find that helps. And so what you can do is take a sponge, wet one side, the side you're not going to gesso, and then gesso the other side. That might help. It might equalize the material. But that's probably where you're running into a problem. The gesso has liquid, it's a liquid, and so it does get absorbed into whatever it is you're putting it on unless that thing is sealed, right? And so there's a good chance that it's probably the gesso that's doing it. And if you're working, oil paint should not warp your canvas. If it's sealed properly with the gesso, it shouldn't have any impact. There should be none of this paint should ever get through whatever is a barrier between the paint and the canvas itself. This will, the paint that we work with will just eat linen or canvas alive. So we have a barrier to protect the material from the paint. So it's more likely than not it's the gesso and how you're putting it down. You might be thinning it down too much, or again, like I'd have to see it being done to be sure what's going on, but my guess would be the gesso is probably your problem.
And that goes for acrylic paint as well, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can put down acrylic paint, and if you thin it down, again, you're talking about applying something wet to a canvas, and it can just drink in the water, right? And depending on how well it's gessoed, yeah, I mean, it'll just drink in the water. Again, of course, if you're talking about a board, a rigid board that has canvas on it, and it's not gessoed already, that's kind of strange. If it's just a loose paper, like just loose canvas, again, it's kind of funny that it's warping. Like, they have like canvas paper, and that warps. That's terrible. Like anything you do on any kind of liquid just warps that stuff. But canvas itself should return to its original shape, and a canvas that is on a board shouldn't warp at all. The board should hold it rigid no matter what you're doing. The fact that you're applying gesso makes me question exactly what you're working on. You're saying canvas board. I'm not really sure. I've never seen a canvas board that was raw canvas that didn't have some kind of primer on it. So again, I don't like, if it were in front of me, I could probably answer the question for you more definitively. I can only guess at what you're dealing with. Maybe give you some things to look at.
Harry chimed in to say that cheap canvas panels will warp. It might be a factor, maybe.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. Like, you guys know my take on materials. Outside of my cheap brushes, I don't cut corners on materials, right? The materials matter. They make a difference. So I couldn't say like a cheap canvas board. I don't know if it would warp. I actually couldn't speak to that. I mean, I've never seen it happen. I mean, I don't know how far down the food chain of canvas boards you'd have to go to get to one that warps. I've never seen it happen.
RJD jumped in to say, I have had canvas panels bow without ever being painted on. Just changes in humidity, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, remember, like, if it's a canvas board, it's probably backed by cardboard. So if you put it in a space that's wet, that cardboard's going to absorb moisture. If you lean it against a wall without any support, it's gonna bend. But that'll happen to a piece of wood too. That's not a matter of the quality of the material. That's just, it's not meant to be leaned against something like that. Like even like this, the ampersand panel, it's a high quality panel, but on the packaging it says lay it flat. Don't even lean it against a wall, don't stand it up. It's meant to be laid flat on display because they warp. And once they warp, it's hard to get them back to flat. Now, like, this stays up here all the time, but it's resting against something so it has support. But if I put it against a wall and it were leaning like this, right? So if this was the wall, this would bow eventually. It wouldn't take long, probably by the end of the week, that it would already start to have a curve to it. Again, I'm just trying to figure out, you see me kind of sketching in lines here, just trying to figure out where everything goes. Better to resolve in a little bit of line work and then flesh it out rather than start filling things in and realizing that the shapes aren't right. And again, I'm basically just redrawing my drawing, my transfer drawing, with the brush as I go. I get all my shapes back in place. And you can see I'm almost done dropping in these extreme darks. Once they're in, I'll start elevating the values. I got a lot more work going on in here than what I did in most of this, just because there's a much broader value range here. But once I've got this down, it should start to move relatively quickly. Right? This is always the slow part of it, when you're just getting the initial marks down and trying to make sense of your transfer, what's still visible to you. I'm just looking it over now, making sure I haven't missed anything. My edges are placed properly, everything is making sense right before I start moving into other values. And again, like I have to think through what I'm doing here. Like, do I want to put down my darkest shade and then fill everything with this and then build up my lights? Or do I want to use these individually and place them only where I believe they go? Up until now, I've been building everything. I've been building up. So I put this down in the shadows, I put this down in the lights, and then I move to this one to bring up my lights. But I have to decide in here, because the range is much broader, oh, this is a prominent value. A very large portion of this is going to be covered with this shade, not this one. So I've got to decide whether or not it's easier to put this down and then build up the light or on top of it, or to put this down only where it goes and then fill in. And then I have the three values distinctly in their own spaces, and then move from there and start building this up on top of this. Right, and so that's a decision I have to make before I move on, because if I'm going to fill everything with this, all my lights, then I've got to make sure everything that's darker is filled with this to start. Right, and there's not a lot, there's just a few more things I would have to put in, but I need to make that decision before I move on from here. Once I move to here, I'm pretty much kind of locking myself into what the next couple of steps are going to be. And so I'm deciding whether or not I want to put in some of the stitching that's in here to define these things with this darker shade. And as I'm thinking about it, it wasn't my initial plan, but it seems to make more sense to me to manage this arm the same way I've managed everything else. Let the process stay the same because I know what to expect. Even though this is going to require bigger jumps in my value range than I had down in here, I think I can still work this up the way that I did this, let it stay more subtle, and then build it up in a subsequent pass, which you're going to see me do in here once this arm is done. So I'm going to tackle this arm exactly the way I've done the rest of the body. It's a decision, and again, you see me making these decisions like on the fly here. I came into this and I knew I had a couple of options on it, and I've decided to go with what I've been doing all along. That way I don't run the risk of this arm feeling disconnected from the body. And I also don't want to run into more work than I was thinking it would be. If I do it the way that I've done everything else, I can estimate what the workload is. And so it's probably smarter, based on the history of this, me getting less done than I intended each time, to take this on in a way that I've done everything else, and I can estimate what the time frame will be to finish the arm. So I'm taking the safe path tonight. It's not going to take me but a few minutes to get some of these other marks in. There's not a lot that was left out. It's more stitching than anything else, a couple of separations between plates. That's all I'm really adding at this point. Like I said, not a lot going on here. I'm almost done. I'll be able to move on to my next shade in just a minute. It looks good. And again, pretty simple. I've just defined just the darkest things that are going on in there. I'm now going to move in. I'm going to basically fill everything. I may leave these extreme highlights alone. I'll see how I feel as I'm filling. But I'm just going to move up one value, fill everything, and then I'm going to jump one value past that. So again, just going to peel back the skin on this paint. Get access to wet paint. Close it back up. Make sure it's patted down. Drop a little bit of oil in this. And again, tiny, tiny amount of oil. For the most part, I can fill everything that's here, at least the lower arm from like here up. I can just fill with this shade. I don't even have to look at the photo reference. I'll figure out the ins and outs of it when I drop the next value in on top. Not even going to worry about edges right now. I'm just going to fill everything, make it solid, and then I'll come back around and I'll knock all the edges down and then add in the highlights as they were. Again, I'll probably do the lower arm and then tackle the upper arm, do them separately. That way I'm not trying to bite off too much and hold too much going on in my mind at one time. This portion should be really straightforward all the way up to here, and then this is going to require a little bit more thinking, and I may change what I'm doing for the upper arm. I may go about it the other way. When I get there, I'll make a decision about it because I'll have had to put some of those lighter shades in here, and I'll see how well they play. I may find as I'm doing this that I don't like what I'm getting. And if that's the case, then I'll make a change for the other portion of the arm. I've got lots of transfer marks in here that I'm just burying now. I'll pull those lights out. It won't be any problem figuring out where those lights go. More than enough information and I'll just be filling in the gaps in between. And again, like I said, that should be relatively easy. Lots and lots of landmarks are in place. Doesn't really matter if I bury the drawing underneath this at this point, because there's only these small spaces, and I can figure out what's going on in here. Right? And that's not just me, but I mean anybody, if you take your time, you can figure out what's missing if you got the big shapes in. Fear of not being able to produce it because there's no line drawing. It's quiet tonight. Assuming. No questions?
Yep, no questions.
But it's like, we'll be quiet so that Kevin gets his painting done tonight. That's not, see any reason why we won't have time to have Hallie kind of jump over and talk for a little while. Give you a little bit of background. Again, even though she's my daughter, she's been in here like any other student. When she first started out, she was like everybody else, didn't know anything. She's been gotten serious in the last maybe 2 years. She's 16 now. Gotten serious in the last 2 years, and you'll see that in her work. I'm not going to show you anything before 14 years old, but I'll show you. You're going to see one piece that she did when she was 14, one when she was 15, two when she was 15, and one that when she's at 16. But it'll give you an idea of what she's doing. It's not going to, you're not going to see much in the way of growth, but just some quality work. Be able to ask her a few questions. You know, what is it like being my daughter? It's got to be awful. In here, being my daughter in here has got to be awful. But no, if you have questions for her, we'll give you a few minutes to talk to her. My goal is to actually have a few students over time to come in where you'll be able to ask them questions about what it is to study here. Words of advice. You know, obviously a 16-year-old producing really, really clean high-end work, well, there's probably something to be gleaned from her. Like, you know, my first question would be like, it's because she wasn't always able to do this. In fact, 2 years ago, she wasn't able to do what you'll be seeing in a little while. So what made the difference? Like that would be my question. Like how'd you go from producing like amateurish work to producing professional level work? What changed? Like, because something happened. Is it the education? Is it a thought process? Like, what is it that bridges that gap? I mean, I've had students in here that were educated that weren't producing, and then an idea crept into their head, and it was that thought that made it possible for them to bridge the gap. And then I have other students where it was simply like they already had the focus, they just needed the education. But it's like everyone's story is a little bit different. But you'll be able to ask her, you know, her thoughts. Allie runs the kids program here. So all of our youth students that come in, whether they're drawing or painting, she's in charge of those classes. She runs them. I'm only here those days because I have to drive her. I basically just sit around and put my feet up while she runs the classes. And next year she'll be taking over for pretty much all of the classes here. I'll be around, but she'll be running most of everything here by next year. That's the goal anyway. She's going to be taking over the school entirely when she graduates high school. At least that's the plan at the moment. Stepping out of this to commit more time to Evolve and some of the other projects that I have going on, and she'll take over the school. Go to college while she's running this. She finishes with college, this will be all she does.
On another note, Kevin,
Yes.
BG from New Zealand said he just completed assignment 1 of block 1.
Hey, good for you. Good for you. Very gentle entry point into a painting program. You know. Congratulations on getting it done. I imagine there'll be great things in your future.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. I think BG actually joined 2 weeks ago, so being in New Zealand and
Got the box of material to him that quickly, eh?
yeah, that's
good.
pretty good.
Yeah.
It was 2 weeks, but maybe time goes by faster than I think. Yeah, BG said so quick. Nice.
Yeah, we try. When people join the program, they're generally very anxious to get started, and we try to get those materials out like immediately. I think they go out within 24 hours of when you sign up, something like that.
Yeah, 1 to 2 business days. Evan, you're making a mess of that painting right now.
Am I? Who said that?
I'm saying it.
I'm making a mess.
I'm just teasing. You just have 2 values for that whole arm, and it just looks funny compared to how real everything else is.
Yeah,
It's that ugly face.
yeah, that happens. Doesn't look that ugly from here. It's pretty nice. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to. And so I'm going to work around these highlights. I'm not going to put anything in there. I've got a lot of stuff I can do around them, but I'm going to leave them blank for now. I think it'll be too problematic to build up those lights on top of layers of these darker shades. And again, as I'm doing this, I'm trying to formulate my plan. I'm not waiting till I get there. I'm just kind of seeing how things are playing out and trying to decide whether or not one approach is better than the other. And of course, experience is a big part of it. Most of my decision-making where this is concerned is based on experience. I've done things like this before. Now, it's been a while, but I've done things like this before. And as I'm thinking, what were the results? Can I remember? And again, it's been a long time since I've handled painting like this. But the experiences are still in my head somewhere. It's just a matter of digging them out. A lot of what I'm doing here is educated guesses as to what the best approach is going to be. even though I said I was going to stop and just do this, I'm thinking I'm going to go up the arm. It just feels like the way to go. Stay with the plan. Treating everything the way I did the stuff down here.
Pretty neat to see how much more quickly you're moving now that you've been doing this a few times. You're very familiar with your palette and all the relationships that went into the torso earlier. It's kind of like you're perfectly calibrated mentally to the painting now, if that makes sense.
Definitely better than it was. Yeah, and again, it's hard. Like, you take a week off. I haven't looked at this in a week. Just kind of sit down and it's like, okay, time to work, and try to figure it out. Hoping that my brain puts together a plan while I'm sleeping. Allows me to just jump in and paint. And again, this isn't foreign terrain for me. I've painted many, many paintings like this. It's just been a while. Not something I should struggle with. I do have to think, though. If I don't think about it, it's very easy to get myself into places I don't want to be. And I'm just going to work around all these bright highlights. I'll stay away from them.
Got a question from RJD. Mm-hmm. What are the differences, if any, between this painting and the Grand Master painting?
For starters, scale. Scale makes a big difference, like psychologically, how you approach it. Like, every mark I'm making is a detail, right? It feels that way. These tiny little movements. The Grand Master portrait, even the details weren't details. I think I got close to the painting to do stuff like this for about 90 seconds out of 85 hours, right? Everything's big, bold brush strokes. I'm standing back at arm's distance working. And so that is a major difference. And it's not just physical, it's psychological. And so, like, I would start right there. Like, that's probably the biggest thing. All of the moving parts, everything that's going on here is just value, color, edge, right? It's all the same. It's just this is complicated in one way, right? The details are one type of detail. The Grand Master portrait, the details were very different. We had golds and things like that. So we're dealing in contrast ratios, like the golds are nice and they have these really brilliant jumps between darks and lights. Where here we don't have much, is relatively neutral except out here. But it's all the same. Like that, I say that all the time, and it's like, it's so redundant, like I'm so repetitive with it. This is no different than the Grand Master portrait in the application of paint. Like, what's going on, like what's in here as I'm doing this, it's exactly the same. And if I painted a dog, or if I painted a landscape, or if I painted a still life, it's all the same thinking. The smaller brushes and the tiny marks are really the only difference. Problem solving, the feel of this. What do the value, color, edge combinations have to be to bring this to life? It's a different combination than what the Grand Master portrait was, the lighting, the coloration, the scale, right? Again, a larger thing, where here, when I make an edge and it's got to be sharp, It's got to be really, really precise, like insanely precise, because being off 1/8 of an inch here is a disaster. But being off 1/8 of an inch on something that's 5 feet tall, you could be half an inch off and you might not even notice it, right? But here, that would be an absolute disaster. The precision of some of these marks, everything is perfectly spaced. I've got to take my time and make sure that's the case. Anything that doesn't fit that level of precision is going to look wrong. And so I have to take much greater care as I get in for these tiny, tiny little minute details. So it's really the scale that's the difference. Beyond the scale, it's really all the same moving parts. Still just values, colors, and edges.
Yeah, the techniques are slightly different, but the fundamentals, the decision making, it's all the same.
And again, it's easy because the application of paint looks different. Smaller brushes, me sitting down here like crouching and leaning in, it kind of looks different. But all of the thinking, and the thinking is what makes the painting. All of the thinking is identical. There's absolutely no difference. Like even in the Grandmaster portrait when I was painting in the gold, there's no gold here. But all of the marks that went down were color value choices against other color value choices with edges that connected them. And there's nothing else there. And it's exactly what I'm doing here. Because this is so neutral, I'm able to simplify it a little bit, where maybe with the Grandmaster portrait I couldn't do it nearly as much. The value jumps were a little bit broader. But again, overall, we're dealing in exactly the same moving parts. Right? And again, that's the whole point of like the Evolve education, is that we teach you how to manage those moving parts because they're present in every painting. They're present in every two-dimensional digital file. They're present in every watercolor, acrylic, airbrush, pencil. It's all the same, right? And so if you can learn how to manage those moving parts, you become capable of managing any medium.
About that Grandmaster painting, did it ever make it there?
Did it ever make it there?
Yeah, the whole situation with the painting.
Oh, the painting being lost?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's gone. I'll be doing it over. They just confirmed that with me actually yesterday. So I got to get on it. It has to be delivered first week of September. So I will be painting it over the summer. It is not likely that I will be live streaming it or anything else. I need to sit down and work. I'll be doing it probably during my summer programs. So I'm not going to be able to time it in such a way that I can set up cameras and let people watch. That painting took 85 hours because I was talking so much. I need to get it done in half that time, which means no audiences, just me working. But there will be other stuff. There's always other stuff. I'll probably take shots of it along the way so I can share it with you, be able to show you progress shots. We're not going to be doing live streams during the summer. My summer programs here at the school just take up too much of my time. I wouldn't be able to sit down and be functional for something like this. I'm here like 13 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's busy.
On that note, I've got a comment from James Sponseller.
Yeah.
How do you squeeze 48 hours from each 24-hour day? That seems to be my biggest problem.
I don't sleep much. You know what? When I work, I have purpose and I'm not distracted. I have lots of things in my life. I've got kids. I'm bouncing around all over the place, and I'm dealing in schools, and I'm dealing in Evolve, and I'm dealing in this school, my own paintings, kids. I have a crazy schedule. But in the moments between all the things like running out to get my kids from school or dropping them off in the morning, I have these locked in areas where I might work for an hour, but I am so intense in that hour. I'll do 3 hours of work because I don't blink. I don't step away from my work. I'm not snacking, I'm just working. And I move through a thing and I'm done with it, and then I'm able to go run out and grab my kids. I drop them off, and then I take another like half hour and I polish something off. But I've been working for myself since I was 23 years old as an illustrator. There's nobody to stand over you. You've got to manage it yourself, and like you control your time. And it's like when I work, I do my best to not be distracted, right? Like even sitting here, like I was saying, like when I do the Grandmaster portrait, I'm not going to have an audience. I'm not going to have anyone sitting next to me because look at what happens. I spend half my time not painting. I'm just talking. And even when I'm working, I'm not optimizing what I do here because my attention is divided. And so when I do that portrait, I need to turn it around quickly and be done with it and not get tripped up. And so for me, kind of shutting everything out so I have no distractions. And during the summer program when I'm doing it, I'll probably only work a half hour at a time. I'll make sure everything is squared away in the school. I know I have a half hour. I'll do a half hour, and it'll be like lightning fast application. I'll put my brushes down and catch my breath. Make my rounds, check in with students, do all of that. Maybe an hour later, do another half hour. Daniel can tell you, he says, there are times I'll walk up to the easel, I'll work 6 minutes. They're effective 6 minutes. I know exactly why I'm there, what the brush is going to do, what the colors are. I know exactly every mark before I even go to the canvas. I know what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. So every mark is efficient, and it impacts the painting in a big way. 6 minutes, and I'm done. Brushes are down, I'm off doing something else. And I'll work like that. I'll work like that over the 12-hour day. I should be able to turn the painting around probably in about, easily within 2 weeks, maybe 1 week. So I'm expecting the painting to take me about 30 hours. So now mind you, I've painted it already, so I know what I'm getting into. And there are things that I did in the first painting that I would not do again because they were not effective. They did the job, but they were a long road to get to a place that I could have taken a shortcut and gotten the same result. And so I will apply that experience to this new version of that painting. No, it doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it plays out. I'm expecting to not run into any major hiccups on that piece. Right? For those of you who watch me painting, you know I started the face. I put in like 6 hours on the face and then wiped it off. The face was half done, and it looked fine. It just wasn't the approach that I wanted for that face. And I didn't want to see the face through the way that I was painting it. I wanted it to have a different feel to it, a different application. Right? And again, what you see on screen and what I'm seeing with my eyes, the way the light interacts with the paint here in the space, is different. And so I don't know that there was any real difference between the final painting and what I was originally laying down that I wiped off. But for me, it wasn't doing what I wanted to do, and I wiped it off the painting. People were writing in that they were having a stroke watching me do that, wipe away 6 hours of painting. But it's funny, like I put in 6 hours and I had maybe half the face done, and in 4 hours, I actually basically blocked in the whole head, not just the face. So I wiped it off and I actually approached it in a much faster technique, which was nice. It would have taken me about 12 hours to finish the head in the way that I was doing it. And so by wiping it off and doing it the other way, it took me about 10 hours. So I saved myself a couple of hours. And whatever stress the more direct approach, which I was originally using, would have caused. I'm not a fan of that direct approach to painting. I find it tedious. So if you go back and you watch that video, you'll see, I talk about it while I'm doing it. You get a sense of what I'm talking about if you haven't already seen it.
Yeah, I'll find that and see if I can drop it in a link into the comments. But we have another question from Darkstar.
Yes.
A question came up about photographers and relationships with artists. What should we be aware of when paying a photographer for, I guess, rights to paint their photo or use their photo as reference? And she clarifies more. It's Miriam here, by the way. I guess, how should we as artists protect ourselves if we're using someone else's photo as reference if we don't plan on taking our own?
Well, basically what you're doing is you're buying the right to use their art. Basically their art, their photography. And so you don't even need a crazy contract, right? What you need is something that says very simply that you're paying them X amount of money for the right to use their photograph as reference in a painting that you are going to create, and that the payment that you're giving them is the only thing they are entitled to for the use of their photograph, and that you are only allowed to use it as reference and nothing else. Now, they may ask for credit, so whenever you post it online, you would say, this is painted by me, the photo reference was photographed by this person. But that's all. I mean, just as long as you have a clear understanding of what you are paying for and what they are entitled to when they give you the photographs, right? Again, they're not entitled to a portion of the proceeds if you sell the painting. You are paying them for the right to use their photograph as reference. Whatever you pay them up front, 10, 20, 50, $100, whatever it is, that's it. Mind you, if you go out to Shutterstock.com, you can see what they allow you to use the stuff for, and you can buy these files. They're a couple of dollars each. So just be thoughtful about that. Shutterstock.com is a stock photography. It's an online stock photography house. And there are a number of companies that are like that. And you go out and you can see what the rights are that you're buying, and then you buy the size of the image that you want as reference as you need. But it's a one-time fee, and you own the ability to use it for reference for the piece that you're buying it for. That's all. And you don't have to give credit to anybody for that.
And a question from Laurel. When shipping a painting, do you insure it for the cost of replacement or a portion of it?
That's a tough one. So when I ship a painting, I use an outside insurance company. I don't use the insurance through, like at mailboxes. I won't use their insurance. And the reason is that on your label that says that it's insured for $3,000. So any thief rifling through those boxes sees that there's a box with a $3,000 value. They have no idea what's in the box, but they know it's worth $3,000 to somebody. So it's reasonable to steal it, right? Again, and these things, the Grandmaster Portrait's a great example of that. Big crate insured for not enough money, but insured for $500, went out the door and disappeared. Somebody took it off a truck. FedEx didn't lose it in a warehouse. Somebody lifted it off a truck. They didn't know what was in it, but it was insured for $500. It had to have value. If it was insured for $0, it might have been passed by, just a big heavy crate. But because it was insured, maybe somebody thought they could take it and sell it for $500. So in the end, for me, I insure with an outside vendor, so I am insured, but it's not listed anywhere on the paperwork. Most artists, they don't insure their work when they ship it that way because it goes under the radar. What I've found is I will ship a package out. Because again, I don't want the money. I don't want to be reimbursed for the lost painting and then be stuck painting the painting again. So I will ship out my paintings last pickup of the night, and then I will pay extra to have it delivered at 7 o'clock in the morning the next day on the other side of the country. And so the package never gets put down. It goes from one person's hands to another, onto a plane, off the plane, because it has to be moved so quickly to get where it's going. There's no chance for it to get lost. There's no chance for it to get lifted because it doesn't sit idle. It doesn't sit in a room for 3 hours waiting for something. It's moved the whole time. Again, if it's going out to California and I ship from New Jersey, that's a 6-hour flight. They pick up, it's got to get from me to their warehouse. the warehouse to the airport to the, onto the plane, over there, and then threw everything over there and delivered. There's not a lot of time between an 8 o'clock pickup here and a 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock delivery there. It's 12 hours. 6 of it is eaten up on the airplane. There's no time for it to get lost, right? And so for me, that's one of the things that I do. My clients pay the extra money for the security of having their painting delivered first thing in the morning. And again, like I said, I'll drop off. I think the last pickup here is like 9 o'clock. So I drop off at 9 o'clock and it's delivered at 7 o'clock on the West Coast. It's 3 hours on this end, 3 hours on the other end. That's the extent of where it could get lost. They're running with it the whole time. But again, if you're going to insure it with an outside vendor, once you start to get up into, start getting up $500, $600, $700, again, a small box is easy to walk off with, and if it's a $700 item inside, they don't know what it is, but $700 is $700. Makes sense to walk off with it when there are hundreds of other packages that aren't insured for anything, so they probably have no real value. So, but that's, you take the risk. If something does disappear and you haven't insured it, you're taking that risk. You have to eat that cost, right? So that's something to keep in mind as well. Packages do disappear. It happens all the time. So, it's really it's a personal thing to decide how you want to manage that. Like I said, for me, the Grandmaster portrait was lost in transit. It's not about the money. I now have to do the painting over again. Now, had it been insured, had it been me shipping it, the painting would have been lost, and I would have been paid to do the painting a second time. But I don't want to do the painting twice. I like to do a painting one time and be done with it and move on, right? So it's been a very, very long time since I've had to replicate a painting that I did. And so for me, that's another reason that it's not going to be done in front of an audience, because I need to get through it. I have a fear that it's going to be exhausting because my energy has already been spent on that painting. So I've got to find a way to tackle it. So I won't paint it the same way, but I'm going to tackle it in a way that excites me about making the painting again. So it doesn't feel like it's being made again, but it feels like it's a new painting being created for the first time. And so the application of paint will be completely different. I'll tackle the painting. It won't look the same, but it'll look the same. Like if you get up close, it'll be a different painting, but if you step back, it'll look pretty much the same. And it's figuring that out along the way. So I'm back into my shadow shade, mixing it into the lights that I just put down to create a third value, one that fits between the shadow and the light. And as I'm doing this, I'm also making my gradients. Make sure all of my form is described. Every little bit of it. I don't want to leave any of it out. Just lines here. I want everything to read is explaining something of dimension.
Got another question for you, Kevin.
Yes.
Do you have any advice for artists with ADHD? It takes me ages to focus myself. It takes forever to finish the work. And I usually don't finish anything because I start to hate my work or idea in the middle of the process.
Yeah, that's a real challenge. I gotta say, I think, starting point is only paint what you love, right? Only paint what you love. Don't paint for money. Paint what you love. After it's done, if you want to sell it, you can sell it, but don't approach stuff and say, well, this is something I think would sell. I'm not that interested in it, but I'll paint it because I think there'll be money on the other side of it. Because yeah, it's very easy. Even people who are highly focused hate that. I cannot do a painting just for money. I have to enjoy what I'm working on to be able to give it everything that I've got. And that's a requirement if you're going to do it professionally at any level. And so do what you love so that your focus stays. You know, that you maintain your focus or not your focus, but that you maintain an interest in the thing, even if it takes weeks or months to get it done. And maybe what you do is you allocate a small amount of time each day, no matter what. Maybe you say, I will put in 2 30-minute sessions today. I'll do one at 1 o'clock and one at 3 o'clock. And even if I'm still focused, I will put my brushes down. No matter what, I will put 30 minutes, there'll be an alarm, 30 minutes, and I'll give myself maybe a 5-minute window to, you know, clean up anything that needs to be cleaned up at the end of that window. And that's it. And so you prep only for that. The paint is still there. Then you do the second 30 minutes, like say 2 hours later, and see if you can hold the focus. If that works, expand it to 45 minutes or 40 minutes and see if you can do it like that. Break up your day. I can tell you, like even for me, like I can only work for so long. When I was younger, I could sit in front of an easel for 12 hours and never get out of the chair. I can't do that anymore. Like this, even this, if I wasn't sitting here filming, I'd be up and down out of this chair every 5 minutes. I'd do a few things and get up, get back down. I'm all over the place. And so, like for me, what I would say is just, again, break it up. And don't beat yourself up over the fact that you're breaking it up. Just let it be part of your process. Just accept that that's your process, that you work for a half hour and you take a break. And you work for a half hour and you take a break. Find a place, something that works for you. And what you can do is you can put a little bit of clove oil in your paint. It'll keep your paint wet forever. Just cover it, like make big batches, put clove oil in it and cover it. And so even if it takes you a week to paint something or a month to paint something, you're still gonna have wet paint inside of these puddles a month down the road. I'm 3 weeks out and this stuff's still wet and there's nothing in it. Had I put a drop of clove oil, these things would be wet probably 6 weeks from now inside. So that's a, you know, but the idea is don't put so much pressure on yourself to be doing what everybody else is doing. What works for you? Don't make the process unpleasant for yourself unnecessarily. I try to keep it so that it's an enjoyable thing. I hope that helps.
And we've got another question from Brock Davis. Kevin, do you teach tonal underpainting with earth tone colors?
No, I don't. I find that it's, so when I have friends that do that, and it's like doing the same painting twice. You do it in gray and then you do it in color on top, and it just seems unnecessary. To me, it's slow. It's a nice way when you don't understand how value works to work out value in a painting before applying color. But I think that it just generates more hours in front of an easel. And I don't even know that you get a better result for it. In fact, I would say that you don't. Best you do is get an equal result. And so why put in the extra labor? Right, that's my thing. Like for me, again, I always go back to the same thing. Like I do this professionally. I don't want to spend 13 hours on a painting that I can do in 12 because I'm throwing away money. Throwing away, again, if it takes me 10 hours to do a painting, and I can do it in 9, every 9 paintings I get another paycheck out of it because I can do one more painting, right? If I can just cut 1 hour off the 10-hour painting, I have to do that 9 times and I can do another painting for the hour I saved over each one. And I've always thought like that. It's business. And so for me, anything that extends the time to get a painting done that doesn't create a better painting, I don't do it. I don't entertain it. Now, and part of it is like if I play around with it and I really like it, now I'm steering away from it sheerly for financial reasons, which is no good. So for me, easier to just sidestep that entirely. I said, I have friends that a painting like this you're talking about, like an approach like that, is a 100-hour painting. This is gonna take me 30 hours. This would be a 100-hour painting. When you're trying to make a living, it takes you 100 hours to do something that someone else can do in 30, that's insane. And so again, if you're doing it just for yourself and you wanna paint like that, I mean, that's great. But for me, it's a matter of dollars and cents. It's purely business. And again, if it gave a better result, I would think differently of it, but it doesn't, at least not to me. Somebody else might think that the result is much nicer than what we do, and so then it might be a good fit for them. But for me, it just seems like a waste of time. Sure, I'll hear from people on that one. But again, and I hate to sound like it's all about business, but the truth is, if you're doing this professionally, it is all about business. You try to do the things that you enjoy, but if you don't deliver paintings, you don't get paid. You don't get paid, you don't pay rent, you can't buy food, you can't do anything. You can't buy art supplies, right? And so you have to be able to make a living at this if you're doing it professionally. You have to make money, and the more paintings you can do at a high quality in the same amount of time, the more money you make, the better off you are, the more flexibility you have in everything you do in your life. And so for me, like that comes first. This is business. I only want to paint what I love, but this is business. And so in the application of paint, I'm only looking for the best way to get this stuff done. And that does not strike me as the best way to go about this. And it's not to say, I have friends that do it, and like, that's their technique. I've got one friend I've got in mind at the moment. We have this conversation every time I look at his process. And I ask him, like, why are you still doing that? Why do you still work that way? Because he can do anything he wants. I mean, the guy's an incredible painter. And he's only painting for himself these days. He's not concerned about the money end of it. He's just painting for the love of painting. And he was a pro many, many years. I mean, he still gets paid. People still buy paintings from him. But he doesn't care about that anymore. And he paints that way because he loves the feel of it. He likes the pace. He strolls through his paintings. There's no pressure to perform this. He just enjoys the process. And he doesn't care about anything else beyond that. Again, I have a very different take on it because of what I'm doing with it. For me, the financial end of it is important. Again, I know a lot of artists that kind of turn their nose up at that kind of thinking, the financial end of it being so important. But the truth is, like, if you can't afford the materials to work with, you can't paint, right? And so you want to make sure that whatever it is you're doing, whatever you pick as your approach, enables you to make enough money at it to be able to do it all the time. To not have to, you don't want to be in a place where you can't do a painting because, you don't have supplies. And supplies are expensive. The more work you do, the more likely of selling what you do, right? You have a large supply. Something that you do will appeal to somebody. The less paintings you have, the less likely that you'll find clients. This really is the nature of it, because if you do 10 paintings, you'll have a certain number of people who will see them, and in those people, do you find 10 people who are interested in those particular paintings? If you have 20 paintings, that same crowd, you're twice as likely to find somebody who is interested in one of the paintings that's there, just because there are more options for them. Something that will resonate with somebody that wouldn't resonate with somebody else. Getting back to the original question, I stay away from things that are slow. That's definitely a slow approach. I've never seen anybody do it quickly. And it may be that people out there who can do it quickly, I've not seen it. It always strikes me as, like I said, it feels almost like doing a painting twice.
Got a question from Becky.
Yes.
What would you suggest are the best things to paint for selling?
There's no such thing. No such thing. Paint what you love. If you paint stuff with the intent of painting something that people will buy, nobody will buy what you make because you have no passion for it. Your passion to make money selling art will not sell art. Your passion for a subject that you paint beautifully from the heart will sell art because it'll resonate with people who feel the same way about that subject as you do. It's never about, even though I talk about it as a business, don't try to figure out what to paint to make money. Paint what you love, paint it beautifully, and you will find a clientele. It's that simple. There's no other way to do it. You know, and everything in the world, I always joke around about this. I use thimbles as an example. You know, at any given weekend here in the US, there is a convention somewhere for everything, right? So somewhere in the US this weekend, there is a convention for people who love thimbles. Yeah, the thing you put on your finger when you're sewing. And if you make thimbles, right, because you love thimbles, you have a place literally every weekend at one of these conventions to sell what you make. But imagine making thimbles because somebody told you that thimbles sell, but you have no interest in thimbles. Do you think what you make is going to resonate with people who love thimbles? Probably not, because you don't care about thimbles. You don't know anything about them other than what they are as a physical thing. But why would somebody drop $100,000 on a special thimble? Well, you can't possibly fathom that because you only care about making money at them. But if you are a collector of thimbles, you would understand exactly what makes the $100,000 thimble special. And so paint the things you love because you'll be part of the crowd of people that you're selling to. You will know why they're interested in what they're interested in, so you'll paint the things that are of interest within that crowd because you're interested in those things as well. But that is the best advice I can give on that. Never try to figure out what to paint to make money. Paint what you love and then find the audience for it. Doesn't matter what it is. There are people, we have so many people in the world. It's so easy to find people who have interest, especially with the internet. So easy to find people who have interest in the things you have interest in. I'll give you a great example of that. So Piper with Evolve, she decided she was going to do equine portraits. So portraits of horses. She's been riding horses since she was a little kid. Her family, like her brother's a trainer, right? She is invested in that industry. She didn't have to learn anything in order to be able to have conversations with potential clients. She knows the horses when she's looking at what kind of horse they are. She knows she's connected to that industry from a very young age. It was just a matter of going out and showing people the work. She knows what would make somebody in that industry want to own a painting of that horse. So she just married her love of painting with her love of horses, put them together, and she's just flying along. Wasn't thinking about what would make money. She just took the two things that she loved and put them together, and she has a career. But that's the way to go. And it doesn't matter what it is that you paint. Does not matter what it is. Whatever it is, there's an audience for it. You just have to find them, and the internet makes that easy. I mean, a quick Google search will tell you where they're hiding. What time is it?
It is 9:40.
Talking and talking and talking, and actually, this is actually very close to completion. It's not that far off at this point. Again, I'm just trying to turn the form a little bit in here, trying to make it feel a little bit more three-dimensional before I start dropping in those highlights. So gradients and, and just establishing a little bit more variation in here. Again, you can see I'm just dropping the shadow in and creating gradients. Variations. Again, I'm going to be dropping in these brighter lights, which is going to really round these things out. I'm not trying to finish this. I'm just trying to get some basic form between the shadow and the base light, and then I will really round everything out when I put in the brighter lights. Technically, they're not highlights. The highlights are really out here, but this brighter stuff in here, more like what I did down in here. Again, the arm is probably, I'm going to bring the rest of the body up, but the arm is probably going to stay like this tonight. As I'm working, I'm getting a feeling that it's not going to allow me to push it further, which is fine. It'll take me minutes next week to then bring the arm up, and then I can throw this palette away. Just about done with this. I'll be able to start. Again, I just want to make sure I'm getting everything here. I don't want to miss something and have to come back and clean it up later on. So I'm really taking my time to make sure I'm not missing anything in here. There's lots of little ins and outs. Again, I'm going to be able to clean a lot of this stuff up. You'll see it when I do this. Be able to clean a lot of it up later on and really kind of punch it up. But I do want to make sure that I've got the general bones of this in place. allowing the bottom of this arm to marry to the body here. Jump away here, but let it connect here. That's good. I'm going to move up one value now. I'm going to work in here. This stuff I'm going to leave for now. Those are really bright highlights. I'm going to leave them for now. So again, peel back some paint. This, and then just gonna push this back down and close it up. A little bit of oil. To overwrite everything, I'm looking to just lay these in as, they're not highlights, but they're lighter areas. Try to manage my edges as I go. I'll do a small section and then try to manage some edges. There's lots of, the gradients in here, they're very small, so I have to be thoughtful about what this is explaining. A sharp edge or a gradient is explaining volume. In which case it would require a gradient. Some of these places, the gradients would be so small, there's no way to actually make a gradient. So it's like I have to kind of tap the edges to soften them a little bit. Expression. Not able to real gradients in some of these places. The areas are just too small to get into. Are we going to move this up? Like this will be the last value I put down in this area, and then next week you'll see I'm going to bring this up. Next week I'll do that here as well. Easier to do it on dry paint rather than trying to work it in over wet paint.
Kevin, I've got a question for you from Dina.
Yes.
When buying a brayer to get the bubbles out after gluing a canvas to a board, should we use a soft rubber brayer or a hard rubber brayer? Is there a specific brand that is best?
I have no idea. Never done it. I really don't have any idea. Anytime I've had to mount something, basically do contact cement on both sides. I let it dry, takes a minute. And then after it's dry, I put a piece of tracing paper in between. I lay them down and square them up and slowly pull the tracing paper back, allowing the two things to make contact, and they just lock in as I do that. And I just kind of run my finger back and forth over it to make sure there are no air bubbles. I don't need special tools, just patience, plan. And I've glued some big canvases onto masonite panels and things like that. Not for painting, but like giclées. No air bubbles or anything like that. Just a little bit of patience as you work. I mean, like with everything, take care, you know, be patient, make sure you've got everything you need at hand when you work. You know, do something small to test it out first. Know what you're doing.
Here's another question for you. Not that you've had any, but how would you handle dissatisfied clients?
Why would you assume that I've not had any? Possible that I have. A dissatisfied client, well, I mean, it depends why they're dissatisfied. You know, if I do a piece of art, so I have a contract, and my contract says that I'm the final determining factor as to whether or not a painting is done, right? And so if a person doesn't like the painting, as long as it looks like the other work that I've done that was what encouraged them to buy originally, tough luck, right? They're basically required to make payment and take delivery of the painting. But I would never do that to somebody. If they don't like what I've done, I would try to clean the painting up and get it to a place where they were happy. Right? Because your paintings are your calling card, right? If you do good work and people are happy with what you do when you deliver it, you'll always find work. They'll tell their friends about you and all that. And if they're not happy, they'll tell not just their friends, but they'll tell everybody, right? Because that's the nature of it. Where they say, like, you know, if you go into a restaurant and you have a bad meal, if you have a good meal, you tell 2 friends. If you have a bad meal, you tell 10. And it's no different with art, right? So if somebody has a bad experience with you, assume they're going to tell everyone they know. And so you make sure that their experience is a good one. You are much better off eating the cost of the painting than having somebody out there trashing the quality of your work. That's never a good thing, right? And if somebody's not happy with what you've done, why would you want it on their wall? I understand the financial end of it, but why would you want it on their wall? You know, why would, you know, you chalk it up to the fact that they're not happy with it, and again, I mean, to the degree that you can, you just eat it. But yeah, I mean, customers, because that's what they are. People who buy your art, they're customers. They have to be happy. They have to be happy with what they've purchased. You know, and so, but your contract has got to, you know, if you have a contract, it's got to do a good job of protecting you. Like, so you can do a deposit, and the deposit is non-refundable, right? And the deposit is done, you can say it's up front. It's a small percentage, let's say 25% up front, and then you work through sketches. You have to get a clean, finished sketch approved, and then they pay you another 25%. You've now got a half. You've not started painting yet, but you got the initial interest where they give you 25% knowing you're going to deliver a painting. You then show them what you're going to do, and they approve it. You take another 25%, and these things are non-refundable. At that point, you then do the piece of art, and upon acceptance of it, they pay the other 50%. If they don't like the painting, they don't have to buy it at that point, but that initial 50% stays yours. Again, you have to have a contract that makes that clear how that works, And you want to make sure that when you're dealing with somebody that they understand that, right? And the reason that you need that 50% is because it costs you money and time and energy and materials to produce that piece of art. And you can say, well, like, art is subjective. And even though you're looking at everything I have here and you like it, you might not like what I produce for you. And so, this is just my way of kind of hedging against that potential, right? Because I have bills to pay just like everybody else, right? And most people would understand that.
And a follow-up question to that, do you give the client one last look at the painting before you varnish it?
No. You understand, like so a couple of things. One is that the more expensive your work, the less likely the clients stick their fingers into it. They hire you, like the higher up you get, the more people are hiring you because you're an expert. They don't know anything and you know everything, and that's why they hired you. They don't get involved in it. But at the same time, at that level, you are delivering an incredible product. Because if you weren't, they wouldn't be talking to you. And so there's a mutual respect. As long as you're not deviating from the kind of art that they saw. Like, I can't do this and show this and bring in a job based on this and then do something abstract. That's a bait and switch. I have to deliver a painting that looks like the 100 they saw in my portfolio. It has to fit in there naturally. As long as it does, there's not going to be a problem. The quality of the work, again, in a portrait, has to look like the people, has to feel like the people that are sitting. As long as you do that, you won't have a problem, right? But that requires the ability to consistently deliver the result, right? And that's where your education comes in, consistently delivering a result so that whatever it is that they see that makes them want your work, you can deliver at that level over and over and over again. You don't hand them something that's 80% of what encouraged them to talk to you to begin with. It's got to be a match in quality. Not necessarily in look, but in quality, it has to be a match. Otherwise, they'll feel like I said, like it's like a bait and switch. I saw one thing, and what you delivered was not the same thing. What made me want your work wasn't delivered in the painting you brought to me, right? And again, to put yourself in that position. What would you do if it was somebody else doing it for you, right? You wouldn't want to pay for something that you don't want. Right? And so if you understand up front that there's a cost attached to it, because it is art, and you understand, right, again, your contract allows them to not take the finished piece if they don't want it, but they don't get their money back that they have given you. You're only taking a portion of it up front on the off chance that there is an issue. And then it's your job to make sure that you deliver. You just deliver something that's not going to cause a problem, right? Deliver something that is equal to or better than anything they saw in your portfolio, and you won't have a problem.
Switching topics here, got a question from Gino, an Evolve student.
Yes.
And Kevin, I know you don't always like to answer these kind of Evolve specific questions, so you can answer this one how you will, but I think it is worth just bringing to your attention. Are there any other methods of measuring our subject? I'm close to block 2, and I'm troubled of how it will work for me. I can't stretch my arm nor my fingers due to health issues, so how could it work for me to measure on eye level?
Okay, so what I would start by saying is that when you do your measuring, like even if you keep it kind of close to you, like you'll be able to manipulate it a little bit to fit your needs. But the goal is not to measure forever. The goal is to learn how to see with your eyes. The measuring is a way of checking what your eyes are telling you. If you can't measure, you can do it with just your eyes and not measure. And again, this is something, I'm not telling you to do this. What I'm saying is that it is possible. And so if you get into block 2 and there is a problem, let's say you get a couple of exercises in and you are struggling, you can't make it work, reach out and have them put you in touch with me. And you and I will do a live chat, and I will walk you through how to get around it. You just let them know when you reach out to Evolve, send them an email, and you say, Kevin told me when I got here if there was an issue that he wanted to speak to me directly, they will put you in touch with me.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Becky is suggesting to you, Kevin, if a ruler inside of the still life box would help standing next to objects?
No, no. Not necessary. It gets in the way. The idea is you want to learn how to use your eyes. And so if you put a ruler in there, you don't give your eyes the chance to do the work. There's a way of getting around it, and I'll deal with it. Again, I'll deal with it later on. It's actually quite easy, and it's actually, the truth is, it's already built into the program. So, wasn't built in for that reason, but it's actually built into the program already. You don't need to use a ruler to measure. Or you don't need to use you don't need to do that. But we can get through, like I said, when you get there, if there's a problem, just reach out to me. I will resolve it for you at that time. It's actually an easy fix.
I think that brings up an interesting point where a lot of your instruction, Kevin, is very straightforward and simple, and it's easy to forget that you are intentionally not saying things, intentionally leaving out, how to word this, but like just intentionally keeping it simple, keeping it very straightforward, simply do this, and it simplifies the process, but it also, the idea is to keep the distractions away. And
yes.
There's a ton of things in the way that Kevin teaches where you might think that adding on this extra thing could be helpful, but Kevin is intentionally ignoring it or leaving it out to give you that simplicity and that freedom to focus and do the things that are extremely effective for the exact stage in your development as an artist.
Yeah, we get this a lot. We get this a lot with the Evolve students. Students will, instead of doing their work, they spend their time trying to figure out shortcuts to apply to do their work. There's color charts and there's measuring implements and all of it is garbage. It's all unnecessary. I mean, it's like I built a program and for all of the results we get, I didn't realize all these other things existed and I forgot to put them in. The truth is I know about all of the measuring implements. I know about all the color charts and all the different things you can throw at this. And most of it is just confusion. The program, the way that it's built, is streamlined to cut away all of that noise and just get to the things that get the results. You can go back and look at that stuff on your own time later on once you know what you're doing. But this is a results-driven program. Do these simple things and get this result, right? Just don't get sidetracked with unnecessary things. We get things like, should I be studying anatomy? Should I be doing, perspective? It's like the answer is no. No, you absolutely should not. I had somebody actually in here the other day, and it was a great description. I always talk about with perspective and with anatomy. I don't believe in opening up a book on either of those subjects until you are really well versed in doing it just by looking with your eyes. Okay? And the reason is this. I'm going to equate it to something else. It's just somebody else actually said this to me when I described it to them, and I was like, you know what? I'm stealing that. It's almost like if you open up an anatomy book and you study anatomy before you draw from a figure, it's like reading a dictionary. You don't need everything that's in there. In fact, you need almost none of it. Use the language, learn, fumble around with the language. And when you don't know what a word means, go to the dictionary and look it up. That's what an anatomy education looks like. Until you get to the point where you're like me, and it's like, okay, I need to understand what's going on in the skull here as I'm working if I want to bring the head to life. But you don't need that at the beginning. If you just learn to look, you learn to see, which is what I teach. You will see all the things you need. You might not understand what's going on underneath the skin, but you'll see enough of it that you can make sense of it and turn it into a believable three-dimensional painting. At some point, you'll find something that you can't make heads or tails of. That's when you go to a book for perspective or for any of these things. But again, imagine trying to learn a language by reading a dictionary. It's insane. And that's what going to books for perspective, and to me at least, for anatomy, that's what they are. It's the same basic idea. And it's like all of these extra things just get in the way and slow down progress. So stay away from them. Keep it simple. Like if you're in my program, only what I tell you to do and nothing else. Everything you do that is not what I told you is a waste of your time. It is a distraction and a waste of your time. And I understand, people procrastinate. They don't want to do the work, so they busy themselves with something else. But we can turn around a student and in 7 hours a week, in 1 year, go from not knowing how to paint to producing professional work if you don't sidetrack yourself with these silly things. There's time later on in life if you want to look at them, but you do my program, 350 hours, you'll be able to produce professional level work. As long as you don't get sidetracked, right? People take longer because they get caught up in other things. They're looking at stuff from other programs. Well, this guy uses a measuring thing. I've got a plumb line. Ooh, look at this color chart. It's all distraction. And so stay away from it. Like in my program, only what I show you. It'll get you where you're going really fast. And I don't miss anything. Like, there's not like I have gaps in the program. Everything you need to know is covered. Everything. So, we have these conversations all the time in the homework rooms, and constantly people are looking for other things. And it's like everything you need is here. It's all in front of you, and don't distract yourself. Don't try to don't create more things and put them into the process. If you can do something with one tool, why would you want 5? All it does is, force you to figure out how to juggle 5 tools, right? And that's the idea. Keep it simple. Keep it as simple as you can for as long as you can.
Yeah, definitely. And taking this to a deeper level, what we're really asking for is trust. Because, and I think part of that lack of trust comes from, I think as artists, we're so used to having to figure things out on our own, and so we forget that we can actually just simply accept a teaching or training and, willingly put the blinders on, for a lack of a better phrase, for like a period of time. Like you were saying earlier about if you're in, don't do 2 programs at once, because that's going to distract and clutter up the information. And but logically it begins to make sense when you recognize, okay, I need to improve. Here are these people that have been through it. They're on the other side. They're here to help me. And so I'm going to put in my time, put in money. And if you don't trust, then you're kind of throwing it all away. And you're relying on yourself again, even after recognizing that you're the one who needs the guidance and the help.
Yeah. When you start putting things into the program, when you start adding to my program, you're now trying to self-teach. The whole point to coming to Evolve, or to any teacher, is to learn from somebody who knows what they're doing. You keep your opinions outside of your education, right? I say in here all the time, most students don't know enough to have an opinion. Do what I show you. Don't formulate opinions until you can do this. Until you can produce professional level work, you shouldn't be formulating opinions about anything. Just do what you're shown. Make sense of the lessons that are being given to you. And that sounds harsh, But the truth is, most people, they ruin their education by injecting their own ideas when they don't really know what's going on. And we all do it. We all formulate opinions and we have ideas. And it's like when you're trying to get an education, you've got to let that go. And part of that is ego. Part of it is ego. Not all of it, but part of it. You know, and so if you want to be taught by somebody that knows what they're doing, you have to let go of pre-existing ideas. Like in martial arts, like when you go from one form of martial arts to another, it's like having a cup of tea, and it can be full in one form of martial arts. But when you go to another form of martial arts, you empty it, and you go in and you let them fill it with the information, with the tea that they offer. It's the same thing in art. So I'm feeling pretty good about this. All my edges are doing what they're supposed to do. Good. So this is kind of aligning with this now. It all kind of feels the same. And I think I'm just going to go around all these outer edges and just drop in this slightly lighter shade, the lighter one, just so that all of these edges have this red on it. And then I'm going to stop this. I'm not going to put in those lights. I'm just edging everything so I don't have these really dark shades later on bumping up against these really light ones that are going to go in. This red, or this value will sit in between, and it'll be a nice buffer to allow softer transitions. I can make them sharp if I want. You know, and it might even be easier to just fill everything rather than, and I think I'm going to do that. I'm just going to fill these gaps. You know, it's funny, I went around them, but I'm just going to fill them. And then, because next week when I paint, it's going to be dry. And my big concern was that I didn't want to lay the lighter paint in on top of it. So I'm just going to drop this in, fill all these gaps. It'd be very easy to drop the lighter shade right in on top next week. So where are we on time?
Yeah, it is 10:15.
Okay. Let's go another 15 minutes, and then we'll bring Hallie over. I'm going to keep working. She'll sit here, and you guys can have a conversation with her while I'm sitting here working.
Okay.
Hi. Hallie. We're going to bring you over in about 15 minutes, okay? You good to stop on your work? Okay. She's over there working on a brand new painting. So she's laying in the flats today, like you saw me do on this. It's a 24-inch by 24-inch portrait. Can't step away though.
Kevin, I think I'll come over there and put a chair down.
Yeah.
Just to help out there.
So I'm gonna have to put it like right over here, because as I'm leaning in, I don't want to block her. Good. So that whole arm is in now. Be good. I'm going to take a soft brush and just kind of knock everything down, just like I did here. Again, all I'm doing is it's kind of blurring edges. And again, you know, like I talk about fan brushes, they make a mess of things. I'm intentionally using it to soften. Everything is smooth and seamless. There are no gaps between the paint, allowing the board to show through. Again, nice and soft. I'm going to build it up, make all the sharp marks. I'm going to show it to you in here, what I'm going to do with this next week. I want to make these feel the same. So that feels about right. This this and this now feel about the same. Good. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use this. Now I'm going to start pulling out these details. I thin my paint out just a little bit more. I want it to flow off the brush. I'm going to move between this and a round.
Are you taking questions right now?
Yes.
Kevin? Okay. Keep the brush from picking up. Sorry, how do you keep the color from picking up on your brush when painting next to an area?
Well, I mean, one, I'm careful about not dragging my brush around casually. But beyond that, like each piece of paint that goes down in a place where it belongs, and try not to just smudge one thing into another. Also, if there's paint on this brush, the brush will release the paint rather than picking paint up. If the brush has very little paint, then it's more likely to pick paint up rather than put paint down. So in here, I'm going to start rendering some details. Let's see if this is light enough. So I've got a zipper in here. Nearly so much, but you can see it's a little bit lighter than what's already down. This is nice and dark back in here, so I'm not going to worry about that. Out here, I've got a little bit of a sharp edge on these little like kind of like egg things. I'll come back in and I'll make sure these things are graded later on. These little hits of light, these are going to be much brighter later on when I put these really bright lights. Here. So I don't want to get too bright in here. I do want to grab this middle one and make it a little bit brighter. So it feels like a separation in the suit, left and right. Lines at the moment. I'll go in and I'll fill in larger spaces afterwards. I think I'm gonna leave this portion of the gun for next week, but I'm gonna do like this down in here. So these are just brighter marks. It's the same exact shade, only it's now laying on top instead of mixing in. I can make them lighter as I go. Additional highlights to that later. Again, I'm going to be able to move through this quickly. It's not a lot of painting. It's really just a few linear marks. Same color and value as what's already down in the lights, but because it's not mixing with anything, it feels much brighter. Just placing things properly. So a little bit of light in here. This dark pulls away a little bit more from these lights. Again, there's just a little movement in the clothing here. And I can go around and kind of soften it later on. So in here. Again, I don't want everything equal. I'm just trying to describe some of the stitching. stand out just a little bit.
Nicholas said, I heard that having too much contrast in the shadows ruins the atmosphere, and the shadows should be flat. Is that a pretty good general best practice?
Yes. Shadows, so you've done vacant shadows, so you realize, you should know that shadows, you don't need to do anything in the shadows. With that understanding, if you, when you do paint a shadow, realizing that, from vacant shadows, you don't actually need to do anything. It gives you an idea of how little you need to do in order for them to be effective. Right? If they're effective with nothing in them, then putting something in them at all, you keep it very limited. Very, very, very subtle amounts of color, subtle value shifts, soft edges. Those things, you diminish them in the shadows and accentuate them in the lights. Just keep an eye on the time. I want to make sure we bring her over.
Yep. It is 10:25 right now, and Kevin, we're not sure about how the audio system is going to work for this. So I don't know if you want to.
Right. We forgot about that.
You could switch out your mic off screen if you'd like.
Yeah,
or
we'll figure something out.
Yeah. I'll be monitoring the audio as best I can, and everyone in the comments can let me know if we're having issues. We'll do our best.
Yeah. Well, she's sitting here, should be fine. And so I'm just building in some of these things. The form is already here. I'm just pulling out a few details. And again, not all of them. If I paint everything with this, then I don't get the impression of these little hits of extra light. Next week, I'll probably go just a little bit lighter on top of this. This and get into the mountain. Be careful about the shapes. I want to make sure that I'm describing things and not just laying down value. Like this in here. Like I'm trying to make sure these shapes feel, if it's round, that it feels round. There's a highlight on the edge of a metal clip. I'm putting it in, thinking of it as a highlight. It's gonna help add dimension to the paint.
Kevin just wanted to share, BG from New Zealand shared, I have a very stressful job and found the first assignment so relaxing, so I am looking forward to it being my time.
Good for you. Yeah,
Whereas
that's great.
The way I was trying to self-teach, books, YouTube, etc., just caused me stress.
With Evolve, you're going to find all you have to do is show up. We'll take it from there. I mean, you just follow what's in front of you. No pressure on yourself. Just kind of go along. Just enjoy the journey. What you'll find is that as long as you put in an earnest effort, when you're done, without any stress, you should be exactly where you want to be.
Got another question for you?
Yes.
From Dina. When you are painting from a reference and there is a bright reflection, do you keep that reflection bright or only go a half step up or one step down?
It depends. So I'm not working with the palette the way you would when you're doing grayscale in the program. So I don't have a half step up or half step down. I'm painting what I see. But I know what I see, right? That's the whole idea, is that when you first start out in your painting, you can't see. You think you can see, but you can't. And so we're teaching you how to see, and eventually you paint what you see because you've been taught how to see. I can see, so I don't need to depend on guidelines like that. I paint the values that I perceive because I'm capable of perceiving them and how they relate to each other. Dana, you're far enough in the program, you should be able to do that. Should be no problem for you. Now, you might require a little bit of confidence to do it, but you should easily be able to manage that. You don't need guardrails at this point to keep you in the range that you should be in with your work.
It is 10:29.
Okay. Hallie, whenever you're ready to come over, you can come join us.
Hey, you can just sit over there.
And you're just going to jump into this seat. So this is Hallie, I'm sure. This is the first time she's doing something like this, so she'll be a little nervous. But anyway, so you can see actually, you might recognize her from the painting, right? So it's okay. It's okay.
It's just like a lens.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is, I just want to open it up and let people, Daniel, if you would show them her work. We'll do the chessboard first. She was 14 when she did that. Then the portrait of the guy and the summer program piece with Bailey.
So I've got it on an automatic slideshow.
Okay, so whichever one is up, we can talk about that when it comes up.
Okay, I'll let you know. All right, so let's switch over. Everyone is saying hi, by the way.
Hi.
Okay, so the first one to come up is the one of the reading the book with the couch.
So that piece was done during the summer program. Hallie was 15 years old, so that was last summer. And that painting took about 85 hours, right? Yeah, so about 80, it's a 100-hour program, but she got it finished early. She really kind of flew through it. What's the next piece?
Give me one moment. The slideshow is going pretty quick, so I'm just going to pull up one at a time.
I mixed it and all the things. I'm almost finished.
Okay, well, we'll stay afterwards. Dan, just let us know when you got the...
Okay, which one would you like next, Kevin?
Do the portrait, the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that portrait was done, about 4 months ago? 5 months ago? That was done for a local politician. The Art Academy, what we do is, in the town that we started, we built a public collection. So anytime we have a new local official elected, one of the students in here does a portrait which goes into a public collection for the town. And so it was Hallie's turn. Hallie doesn't get special treatment in here. She goes along like everybody else, and it was her turn. She'd earned that, and so she got to do that portrait. What else do we have? We do the chessboard.
Sorry, which one?
The chessboard.
Okay.
So this is one, those of you who are involved, you'll recognize it. It's a standard piece that the students in the program do. That chessboard is actually the first time that Hallie really stepped up and delivered. She had been kind of playing around up until that time, and she got very serious on that painting, and you can see it. And she was 14 at the time. And then the last one, let's show the portrait of Cora.
Okay, one moment.
Yeah. And so I showed this a couple of weeks ago while it was still in pieces, but this is the final painting now. And she just finished it. It's her puppy, and I don't know how many hours were committed to it. Maybe like maybe 8 or 10. Not how many weeks, but how many hours? Like 8 or 10?
Yeah.
Maybe not even. Yeah, probably under 8 hours to complete the painting. But you get an idea of it. And she's 16 years old. She's working on a piece right now that's going to be incredible. The image is beautiful, and she's like digging in, right? So anyway, feel free. Any questions? You can pose them to her. I'm going to continue to paint while she answers questions for you.
Awesome. Yeah, let me catch up with the chat here. Yeah, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, you can move the camera. That's where the people are. You, well, I mean, you decide. Like, you got to just think in terms of how you're going to approach it in the next step, and then apply what you think is going to give you the best staging point to start the next stage.
All right, I've got a question for you, Hallie. And just keep in mind that Kevin's mic is right under him, so when he speaks at a normal volume, we hear him perfectly, so you're going to need to kind of project into his
Yeah, you
throat.
can just speak up. That's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. Okay. So, what do you think of your dad's painting of you so far?
Someone's in trouble.
It's good. I don't know. It's very weird to be painted. I've never been painted before. I mean, not recently. He did a portrait of me when I was like a baby. But I haven't been painted recently, and so it feels very weird to like see my face there. But it's a lot of detail. I heard there's a new camera, so you can see it more today. But last week, there was I was watching a live stream, and then I came in the next day or the day after that, and there was just so much detail. I was like, oh my god, that's. But I like it. I'm excited to get it afterwards.
Yeah, she gets to keep the painting when it's done.
Yeah.
Awesome. And a question from Becky. How did you make the sofa look like suede?
It was actually really easy. So for like every single part of the painting, like I learned I got like a new brush for the couch, and it was kind of like flat and kind of spiky, and basically I just like filled all of it with like a dark brown, and then with the spiky brush I took a lighter brown and I just kind of like tapped on top of that, and it has like the soft texture.
Yes, it was a stippling brush.
Stippling brush.
Awesome. Becky appreciates your textures. Now Linda is asking, I noticed you developed your signature over time. Did you try out a few?
I did. At first I wasn't sure if it was just like, simple and just Hallie. I ended up actually copying my dad's Murphy. And so, it just, his, it's a nice signature. And so I just replaced his K with an H. I like that. It's nice.
Like continuing a legacy.
It took me forever to come up with that signature, so it's like, at least it's being put to good use.
Okay, here's another question. Hallie, how nice is it to have a father to guide you through your instruction? Does it help?
Yeah, I would say it helps a little bit. The thing is, it's like, he has really good advice for like art and everything, but it's like
Everything else.
yeah, like everything else, like I could like ask him a question, he'd go on like for like 40 minutes just like talking about like stuff, and then at the end he's like, what was your question? One time he was driving me and my friends, and we were just getting food, and I said something, and then he kind of was like, oh yeah, let me like elaborate on that. And he was talking about like, I don't remember what. I remember there was one part where he was like, you know, you can't like look at life through like a coffee straw, you know, like it's something like that. And he was just like, you know, like just like a casual conversation for him. But then afterwards, my friend was like, Hallie, does your dad always do that? Like it was so casual for him, but like he gets very deep sometimes, very meaningful.
Mm.
See, I don't just do it here. I do it in the car on the way to the store.
Here's a compliment. Your portraits of the man and your dog capture the spirit of each. So beautifully done.
Thank you.
And another question, are you tired of his stories yet?
You know, not his stories. You know, some of the stories from when he was younger, like I could hear probably like hundreds of times. Like,
Oh, yeah.
You know, like ridiculous, like living in the city and stuff. But like some of his like, you know, like pieces of advice that he just like uses over and over again, that I'm pretty sick of, you know. He's a few that he just like always repeats, like knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit, but experience is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. He says that all the time.
I'm surrounded by simple people.
There's one about like a cake. It's like whenever someone's like, oh, this painting doesn't look good, you know, he's like, you know, just like a cake, you can't judge it before it's finished or something like that. And he's like, you can't judge like a cake by like taking a spoonful of flour and then it tastes bad. Like, yeah, it tastes bad. It's flour, you know. Like, you can't judge it until it's finished.
Mm.
That's actually a good piece of advice.
Well, yeah, but, you know,
You're just sick and tired of hearing it, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes I hear him say something to someone, and then, like, I don't really, like, process it, and then I ask him something, and then he says that, like, what he already said to me, and it's like, I feel like I get, like, cheap leftover advice.
Come on, Kevin, you got to keep it fresh.
I'll step it up. I'll step it up, I promise.
It's tough when you're talking all the time, right, Kevin?
You know, it is. I mean, feeling cornered at the moment. Advice is good advice, and you know, it's hard. Like you find ways to describe something, and then it's like, okay, like every different person you speak to, they've never heard that, so you share it with them because it's a good way to describe something. Hallie has the misfortune of being around me all the time, and so she'll hear the stuff over and over and over. Talk to students, funny, like I talk to students about the summer programs. Like Hallie's been like, okay, I've heard that like 50 times already. Could you like just come up with something else? But I'm using what it is that I would use to describe what the program is and its value to somebody who might join it. So of course it's the same language over and over. You know, it's just she's around it all the time. And it's funny, she's saying this, but she's taking over some of these classes and now she's having to use the exact same language to sell the programs and encourage people to do things. So she's going to be just like me. And people are going to be like, you know, she says the same stuff over and over. It's coming. It's called payback.
Sometimes I try to phrase things the same way as you, and sometimes I do it accidentally, and I think I'm like, why did I just say that? And I'm like, it's because of that guy.
That guy.
Yeah. You say like, you know, like the way you phrase things, and it's like, you know, that really sounded like something he would say.
Daniel?
Yes, here's a question about the old Holland brushes and the Simply Simmons. Which one does Hallie use?
Hallie has a whole bunch of different brushes. She uses mine a lot of the time, so she's got a broad range. It's not one brush or another. Mm-hmm. When she first started out, she was using the Simple Simmons. And again, like the old Holland brushes, I don't just have them sitting around here. They're not mine. They're an evolved product. I have some sets and I've worked with them, but I don't just have them sitting around. I have boxes of them. So, you know, like Hallie has some of them and she's used them. She has some other high-end brushes from other companies. But obviously she works with the same paint. Yeah, everything else is the same.
Mm-hmm. And Hallie, which one of the paintings that we've shown is your favorite and why?
Um, um, of the girl with my dog and she's reading a book, probably just because that was like um, it was the first like big painting I did. I spent like a lot of time and like doing it, and the entire time I had like gotten to the point where I like already started becoming like really focused. With the board painting, when I first started that painting, I was still kind of like messing around, and like somewhere during that painting I got more serious. Same thing with the painting I did after that. It was kind of like in the middle of those two. The painting of the girl, she's actually my friend. The entire time I was very focused and very serious, which is why I finished it pretty quickly. And I'm very happy with how it turned out.
And it's big. It's a big painting. It's 4 feet by 3 feet. I don't know how much you make. So I'm feeling pretty good. I like the way this is all coming around. Again, I haven't brought everything up, and I will do another pass next week to bring up even brighter highlights in these areas. But this is looking solid. I've got a lot more going on in here. There will also be darker values that'll get laid in in the next pass as well. So that's gonna make a big difference also.
Some follow-up questions for Hallie. Did you photograph the big painting?
I did. That was actually my first photo shoot. I did it with my dad in my living room, actually. That's my couch. And so, like, he set up all the lights and everything, and he explained what he was doing. But then I tried to take over the photo shoot, and I tried some different poses with my friend, and I tried to do the photo shoot at least.
Yeah, the original design was hers. Like all of it, for the most part, was her. I set up the lighting, but I mean, other than that, it was pretty much her doing all the work.
Yeah, and here's another question. Hallie, what do you find most challenging about painting?
Figuring out when to stop, you know, like growing up, like trying to paint, like my entire problem was that I didn't care enough, and so it's like, you know, like this is fine, I'll just stop here, you know. So all of my work was always really sloppy because, you know, the first time going through it, it was like, you know, I didn't really care. I could always go back and clean it up later, and then when it was time to clean it up, I didn't really care, and so I just stopped. And so, you know, now I'm like trying to be like very critical of my work, and sometimes, you know, it's like, I don't know when to stop, and it's like, at what point am I like, you know, like, this isn't the same as the image, like, it's not the exact same, and it's like, there's always something else you can add, you know, it's like trying to figure out, like, what's, like, an actual stopping point where it's not like you're, like, cheating the painting, you know, and it's not like you're, like, finding a short.
Nicholas said that he has the same issues, so you're not alone.
Yeah.
And did you give the painting to your friend?
I did not. It's actually on the wall of the art school here.
Mm-hmm. Have other ideas of how you would like to run Evolve?
She doesn't get to run Evolve. She gets the art school, not Evolve. No, I mean, she's working her way there, but right now we're just looking at the school, not Evolve.
Already getting replaced.
Yeah, it feels like it. I told them a couple of weeks ago that you were like pushing me out and you wanted the keys.
I already have the key.
Yeah, I mean, you wanted my set of keys.
Yeah, I'll just change the lock.
I see it coming. I do have a sense of it.
Question from Bill. Who is your favorite artist?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd have to say my dad. I'm gonna be honest. I haven't really like gone to like any like museums or anything. I haven't really looked at like a lot of art at all. And you know, it's my dad, so I kind of have to say him.
Especially since I'm sitting right here.
Yeah.
On his show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which of his paintings is your favorite?
Oh, none of them. I don't know. I've seen all of them. I mean, like none of them are really like coming to mind. Yeah, I don't really have one.
It's okay to love them all equally.
What are you working on right now?
I just started a portrait of one of my friends. It's pretty simple. She's laying on the ground in a dress with her hair kind of like placed down beside her, I guess.
Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions come through. Welcome to stay, though. Join the conversation. I guess we'll do a final call for any questions. Becky said that the hair on your friend in the sofa painting looked really nice. How did you do the hair? Is now the question.
It was multiple layers. It was like basically it's like you have like a layer of like dark paint. Okay. With like dark paint, then like a lighter paint, and then dark paint, and then you kind of just like I think I used a fan brush and I kind of went through it, and so it makes like the like shape of like highlights on hair. More times, and I just kept doing that, and then just like making the darks darker, and then making the highlights like like just building up the highlights. I did it a lot. Every single time I thought I was done, and then my dad was like, "All right, one more time." I'm like, "Really?"
Here's the question. Did you trust the process as we all must do?
I mean, yeah. It like in the beginning, it never looks like anything. Like it's just like a bunch of like flat like blobs of color. And so it's like, you know, it doesn't really look like anything at all, and so you kind of have to trust the process. When I was doing the portrait of my friend on the couch, know the technique, and so my dad was really like teaching it to me as I was painting it, and so I didn't know what it would look like, and so like he would tell me to do something, and I would be like, I don't think that that's right, because it just like like it doesn't look like anything, and it's like how he kept having me like do like there were so many layers, and it's like the finished product doesn't make sense with one of the layers, and so it's like the first 2 weeks the painting looked like a mess, like it didn't look like anything. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what technique was that you used?
Speed painting.
Mm-hmm. And we teach that in Block 6 in the Evolve program. And do your friends want to learn how to paint too?
No. I mean, some of my friends already paint. Some of my friends I've made at the art school here. I have this one friend who I kind of got to come in here during the summers because she's busy during the school year, but honestly, the majority of my friends don't actually know that I paint. But no, I don't think that they have any interest.
And what do your friends think about your painting?
I mean, if I show someone for the first time, they go, "That's a painting? I thought that's an image," and they always say that.
Yeah.
But they're always like, "I can't believe you did that. You're so talented." And it's like, yeah, talent, thanks.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that too. And then you have to go through that whole conversation of explaining that as well. I was trained well, wasn't talent, all that. Sometimes you just say thanks because you don't want to repeat yourself again and again. Now, Kevin, there's a painting of yours on the floor behind Hallie. I don't know if you wanted to show that.
No, actually, we'll save that. We'll save that for a time when I've got a photograph of it.
Okay.
Right, because a photograph is going to do it better justice. So, just so everybody knows. So, there's a painting on the floor that I did when I was 18 and a half years old, and I pull it out for comparison because it's so ugly. It's so ugly how little I knew when I was that age. But we'll get a photograph of it. In fact, you know what? Hallie, you want to get up? Give me that painting and give me the painting of Cora. I'd like to do this. Kind of put them side by side.
Just give me a second to adjust the focus.
Can I just do it up on here?
Oh yeah, that's fine. Let's see how we...
And put them one over another, like stack them one on top of the other. So this is Hallie's painting at 16 years old.
If you could move that over to the left a little bit for me. Thank
Good.
you. Keep going a little bit more. Yeah, that's good. Right there.
Good. And so this is 16 years old. This is me, and again, like I have a date on it, so I know exactly when I did it. This was March of 1987. So I graduated high school in June of '86. So this is almost a year after I graduated high school. Make that out. Is that too high? I can pull it down. How's that? Anyway, but it gives you an idea of what I was doing. Like I was 18 and a half years old, right? Yeah, 18 and a half years old when I did this, and she just turned 16. Shows you what a little bit of knowledge will do for you, right? And I didn't get better for a while. Those of you who have seen my portfolio, we have it online. I don't know if you could drop that link.
Sure.
We have a link to my portfolio, and you would have seen this in there. But I was 18 and a half years old when I did this. I was 9 months out of high school when I did this painting. And so, but you get an idea, like you can see the quality, how realistic this is, and how embarrassing this is. But the thing is, it's like this is the difference between like being trained and not being trained. You know? But, you know, and one of the big things with this, like I say all the time, I'm not talented. There's nothing here that would make anybody believe that I was going to be able to be a professional painter. There's nothing in my paint. Now, Hallie is different. You show this to people and you say she's going to be a pro, nobody thinks twice. But my work, there's nothing here, right? I don't have a talent. I don't have any gifts. I just figured out how to do it and I put in the time. And that's a huge lesson. You don't have to be talented. I don't believe in talent. Because if talent was the determining factor, I'd be a construction worker. I wouldn't be a professional painter. And so, but this is, to me, like, you know, being able to bring something like this out and show it again, the comparison is incredible. By itself, it's just kind of funny. As a comparison, you start to get a sense of what an education looks like, how powerful it is. And, you know, and it's like, you know, Hallie is one of the better students in the school. She's up there. But we have tons of students in the school who are capable of doing this at all different ages. You know, like I said, you know, Hallie doesn't get special treatment around here. She comes in like every other student. She clocks on average, what do you do? Like 2.5 hours a week, right? 2.5 hours a week and summer programs. That's it. Nothing else. She's going to start coming in more, but because she's got things to do. She's got paintings to get done and competitions to enter and stuff like that. So she's going to be putting in more time. But you know, what you're seeing here is just she's been trained and she's now putting in the time. She's putting in the effort, you know, and you can see it. You can see it in everything that she does. So anyway, let me give that to you. This one. So I know we're coming up on time.
Yes,
Right.
it's actually 10:59.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop. I was going to drop the mountains, and I decided not to. I figured you had zoomed in on this. And so this is actually in a really solid place now. Like all of this stuff in here has been brought up. It's a little bit more contrasted. Some of the edges that needed to be stronger are now strengthened, giving a lot more dimension. And again, you can see I almost drew like lines on top of what was there. It didn't require a lot to bring it up. And again, I could go one value lighter. I started to put in some lighter things in here. But it's like, this is just a tiny little bit lighter, and these little hits will make the armor look a little bit shinier, just a little bit more reflective. And again, I'm just going to drop in this one last value. It's not going in a lot of places. So it'll read almost like highlights on some of these things. While I'm putting these in, why don't we see if there's any last questions? That way we can kind of end at a reasonable time.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, Hallie, when did you decide you wanted to become an artist?
I kind of always wanted to be an artist, just because my dad was. When I was like a little kid, you know, it's like
Yeah, she started saying it at 6 years old.
6.
Yep.
I don't know. I thought that it was cool that, you know, he painted, you know, pretty colors and all that stuff. I like the idea of, you know, doing what my dad did, mostly because he was my dad. And, you know, I didn't do it, like, seriously. I kind of just, like, you know, came in and out. Whenever the summer programs started, I would stop painting in the summer, or stop, at the time, drawing. And then usually when regular class started, I wouldn't, like, start, like, class again until, like, a few months after it started for some reason, like, every single year. But I always said that I wanted to be an artist, just because, you know, I like the idea of it, and I never really had any other like careers like pop out to me.
This is from Steven. I know some artists work collaboratively. How about Hallie and Kevin working on one painting together in a future live stream project?
At some point, Hallie will do her own live stream. She'll sit in the seat instead of me. She's got too much going on right now for me to put her in that position. She's got things she's got to get done. She's starting to put together a body of work to get commissions, and so this is not the place where she should be for that. But once things start to settle down and she's got the ball moving on those things, then yeah, we're going to have her come in and sit and do some live stream work. And she's a representative of the program, right? Even though she's not doing Evolve, the program's the same program. The education is the same. And so to see her working and let her answer questions in real time as she's going, right? She's using the same technique, and so the answers to a lot of the things are going to be the same, but the way she describes them will be different than the way I do. She's a lot closer to the information in its rawest form. Like for me, when I talk, I'm always, 30 years removed from the first steps of developing these skills, and so for her, she's only 2 years in, really, to what she's doing. And so her ability to answer a question concisely for somebody who's only, a year in, I think is probably going to be, the answer is going to be different. And so maybe more helpful to somebody who's younger in their education. Right? It's easy for me where I am to forget that something doesn't necessarily make sense the way that I might put it in front of people, and that there might be a better way of describing it. And because Hallie is kind of younger in the knowledge, she might be able to do a better job in some of these things. And mind you, she teaches, she runs classes here. So she is an educator. She teaches this program a couple of classes a week. And so it's not like she's just painting, she's actually teaching this program. She teaches not for Evolve, but basically the same exact program that you go through in Evolve. She's teaching that in the school. And so again, like, she can answer technical questions just like I do because she teaches the stuff.
Awesome. One final question from Nicholas.
Yes.
Hallie, do your best Kevin impression when critiquing a painting.
Don't do it. Don't do it. And I'm different every time.
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, that's not a question, but I don't know. He never really critiques paintings. At least not for me anymore. Usually, like when I'm like, when things like aren't working out, he usually doesn't say anything. I usually end up going to him and it's like, like what did I do? Like, like when I can't tell what the problem is, he usually doesn't say anything. And when I ask him, I'm, like kind of desperate at that point, and he's usually pretty clear in his answers. He usually doesn't really like critique. I mean, when he does, it's like like problems, like things that I messed up. It's like like this is so sloppy, you're careless, stuff like that. But I haven't gotten that in a while.
It has been a while. But that's a big one, though. It's careless, not just for Hallie, but like everybody. Learning, we tend to be careless. Our work suffers because we don't pay enough attention to the particulars of what we're working on. Some aspect of what we're doing doesn't seem so important, and so we just treat it with less regard than it requires in order for it to be successful in our work. Good?
Yeah, everyone is saying thank you, Hallie, for coming out, answering some questions. And yeah, thank you guys. We appreciate it.
Wind this down. I'm basically done here. There are no more questions from me.
There's one final question. Does Evolve get into how to paint different textures?
So, again, this is one of those things. There's no such thing as texture when you paint. Like, you think there's texture, but there's no such thing as texture. Texture is the result of how your color values and your edges marry, right? So metal has very sharp edges and big contrast jumps. Velvet has very subtle value shifts and very soft transitions. So it's all about how you control your values and your edges, right? So there's no such thing as texture. There's just how the values and the edges play against each other. And so if you learn how to see how color value choices and the edges that marry them work, if you learn to see it, every texture is manageable just through that thinking, not as a texture, but as color value choices and the edges that connect them. It's skin, it's armor, it's water, it's wood, it's everything is just that. And so there's no tool for texture. There's only how you manage the edges between the color values you put down. And that's the case for everything. And that's really, That is the thrust of this education, is that it's that simple. There is no special thing for skin or hair or, or velvet or metal. It's all the same tools and it's all the same thinking. And once you master that simple thought process, everything becomes paintable. Everything. It's not like you have to learn how to paint metal, because as long as you can see it, you can figure out what the edges are, what the values, what the colors are. Because there's only 3 things to learn. If you try to learn how to paint metal, then you have to learn how to paint wood, and you have to learn how to paint concrete and velvet and skin and hair. But if you learn how to manage values, colors, and edges, everything falls under that umbrella. You master those 3 things, you can paint anything. That's the key to being able to do this. Right? I haven't painted some of these things before, they're brand new, but I can handle them because I have a way of approaching it. I understand it, and I have mastery over those tools, those 3 simple moving parts. And that's where you want to be. So, that's it.
Awesome.
Good?
Yeah.
We're going to call it a night. Obviously, I didn't get to the mountains tonight, but I'm glad we were able to get Hallie in. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. We appreciate it, and we will pick this up again next week. We'll polish off this arm and the gun, and then we're going to knock out the ground, and I guess the week after we'll finish Hallie up. So it looks like we got 2 more weeks and we'll be done. So again, thank you very much for coming.